Um, And just to explain the way we're going to work this is I'm going to ask them a few questions and then we will open it up to the audience. And so don't worry, you'll get a chance to talk to them. But first, I'd like to ask it just seems like this moment, sort of historical moment we're in, this film is so important to make people who are often invisible visible. And in both Tangerine and in this film, you're really showing a population that is often passed by in terms of mainstream media and in terms of popular consciousness for the same reason. And I kind of wanted to know why you were drawn to this topic.
Well, I actually did not know about this situation. I didn't know about this national problem that we have of the hidden homeless, people who are unable to secure permanent housing, who have to resort to whatever they can do to keep a roof over their heads, and in this case, budget motels. People turn to friends and families, living in cars. These are people who are struggling week to week, night to night, just to stay off the street, and they're technically homeless. I had no idea that this even was an issue until my co-screenwriter brought it to my attention, and I thought it was an important enough issue to focus on in a fictionalized screenplay. And also, we have an affordable housing crisis in the United States, and it's something that I don't think we focus on nearly enough. And it was, using this film to shed light on that subject. So, yeah.
Do you think that the idea of the way the film is structured in terms of so much of it feels like it's coming through Moonee's subjectivity?
Well, yeah, it was the children that actually, that's how I became aware of this issue, through the many news articles that were written about the situation in Kissimmee, right next to Orlando. And this very sad juxtaposition of children growing up in budget motels outside of a place that we consider the most magical place on earth for children. So my focus was always going to be children. And therefore it was about, should we go, how much should we focus on the children? Should it be seen through the eyes of children, through a child's perspective? And that slowly developed. My co-screenwriter and I, Chris Brigash, we are also very inspired by the Little Rascals, our gang. And that was actually something that and we started to realize there were lots of parallels there. I always wanted to make a film about children, and every one of my films actually has a wink to our gang. And then we realized, this is the situation that is happening there in Kissimmee is based on the most part on the recession of '08 and the housing crisis that immediately followed that. Well, if you look at the Little Rascals and our gang, that was set against the Great Depression, and most of the characters most of the children in our gang were living in poverty. But the focus was always, the joy of childhood, the humor that comes from just watching children interact and just observing their behavior and celebrating childhood. So we saw it as, in a way, an opportunity to make a present-day Little Rascals, humanizing this people living in this situation through connecting with the children. So, yeah.
Well, and speaking of the children, I even thought the names did have this Little Rascal feel to it. Moonee and Scooty and Jancy.
2-syllable names ending with a Y.
And
that was part of that. That was where we actually did. Now, we could have had this completely grounded in reality, but because we were, again, going through the child's perspective, and it was slightly heightened, slightly a hair above reality. and that was part of that. That was actually like a little wink towards allowing it to be, slightly more in the vein of a Little Rascals sort of thing. Yeah, playful in that way.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Willem, about working with children. And especially, I mean, I don't know if this is the case. It just felt like there must have been at least a little bit of ad-libbing.
A fair amount. But we were working from a very strong script, but also opportunities would present themselves that we would, Sean would see a certain light, and we'd go to that light and create something, or the birds would show up and they were in the way, and we're not supposed to touch them, but we wanted to get them out of there. So he's like, go out there and do something with those birds. Things like that. But in the actual scenes, really, Sean was very good at setting them up in such a way that the children were children. They were allowed to play. And it's not like it's so text-heavy that they're burdened with remembering things or repeating things. And he used to always say very often to the kids, and maybe to me too, put it in your own words if you have to, if that makes you feel more comfortable. But in general, working with the kids, they were great. I mean, sometimes you had to be patient, and everybody gave them a lot of room so they could be mischievous and have a good time and play. So that was kind of understood, We don't want to get too heavy with feeling the pressure of we're making a movie here, or giving them too many technical tasks. So, it's not like he tricked them and then cut around them. No, they were performing well. They weren't like problematic where you had to trick them into doing things. But kind of parallel to what's going on with Bobby, sometimes I had to wrangle them, I mean, they'd get a little wild, and sometimes they'd be encouraged to be wild. I mean, I remember there was one dramatic moment when one of them spat on me. And like everybody was like, But listen.
I never wanted to bring that up before, and this is the first time Willem is actually bringing that up.
You know what? I think it's the first time I've said it, but we've been doing a little press, so we're just trying to mix it up.
I think it was just a moment in which they were
too wound
in
up.
character, and it was one of those where we had multiple takes of one scene, and one of them stayed in character between takes.
So, but they were sweet kids, and the atmosphere, because there was a lot of there was non-traditional casting, street casting, people that weren't used to doing this, they were all in because they had nothing to compare it to. So they were living it. They weren't thinking about careers. They weren't thinking about technique. They weren't stressed. It's a little, maybe it goes without saying, but particularly because the scale of the budget and everything, and the tone that Sean set, it was a very family setting, and the kids, because they'd get tired, because you had to protect them, because if they couldn't perform, they just couldn't perform. You were like kind of their parents. So that was working with children.
Two of them had previous experience, and two of them did not.
Right.
Brooklyn came with having done some commercials and one small independent. Aiden, who plays Dickie in the film, he had some experience. But Christopher Rivera and Valeria Cotto, Scooty and Jancy, 100% green. So they did, yeah.
Just phenomenal. And in that sense of community, that sense of family, and sort of the precariousness of those positions when one family moves away and is moving to New Orleans and giving away all the toys. It's one of those moments where you realize again how precarious living in in the Magic Castle actually is for
But
these
I
individuals.
think also that in that scene you get the sense that people do make communities and they do help each other. And when we were there, the people, the residents, because it was a working motel, the residents really helped us. They were extras, and of course we were shooting, so they'd hang out. We knew when Troy came home from work, and we get to know these people, and that was really important because you didn't start to see them as them or these poor people that were struggling. You started to identify with them, and you started to be them. You're not in their position, but I mean, you have a deeper understanding, and that's such a luxury.
Yeah, and I would say across the board, everybody that we worked with at both motels were so open about sharing their stories. So we could actually, as a co-screenwriter and director, I could turn to them and say, "Is this accurate? Would it go down this way? Are we portraying this correctly?" And we would get feedback. The proper feedback. So it was a really wonderful collaborative experience.
And
as Willem said, some of them made it into the film as either background action or extras, or even some speaking roles. The woman who Bobby kicks out because there might be some drug dealing in that room. She's a single mom with 3 kids living in one of the motels.
The more I learn about this film, the more it becomes even more affecting. The more I feel like I want to require people to see it. And I teach, so I can. But one of the things that I wanted to focus on Bobby for a second, because you have this person who is clearly so warm, but it feels like also having to balance it with the job that he has to do. And yet there is this sort of, I won't say father-like, it's sort of like good stepfather-like.
You can say father-like.
But there is this sort of this position with all the kids, and with Hallie, definitely. And it's, and I was talking before earlier today about how you're Willem Dafoe, and yet I saw Bobby. That there was definitely this sort of, I guess that I was thinking about there being a layer of being really self-effacing in terms of the way that you melted into this community. Because we've all seen independent films where there is a star and where you never lose who that person is. And I don't know if there's a question here.
Well, I can say something about that. I've always kind of been interested in a performance that disappears or melts into the fabric of the thing. I believe in that kind of submission. Those are the performances I'm interested in. I mean, I've always liked performers like Harry Dean Stanton or Warren Oates. People where you think, you just kind of assume they never had training because they're a little too real, They aren't strutting their stuff. They feel like people. And I've always aspired to that kind of performing. And as I get older, even more, when I think of watching how much deeply you can enter, let's say, a foreign film where you don't know the people and you don't know who they are or whether they're considered actors or whether they're considered good actors or who they're married to. You know nothing. And you can enter more easily. So certainly my job here is I can't pretend I'm not an actor, and I can't pretend that people aren't going to see me and make associations that they have already made or think of other movies. But I can do my best to not try to go to the same kind of impulses and to approach things with serving the story and not thinking about strutting stuff. But having said that, there's all kinds of movies, and clearly this movie is one of those movies where the texture of what's happening is you wanna be of the world, you wanna pass, and that was easy, not easy, but it was helped very much by how we were shooting and Sean's approach, and being surrounded by people that after a day or two, we're all together. There was no special treatment. I wasn't separated out at all.
Yeah, but also, Willem is just so transformative, and it was just amazing. It was actually a big sigh of relief our first day of shooting, because I had the fear. We had a bunch of first timers, a bunch of children, and then Willem there, and I was a little worried. I had faith, but I was a little worried. But that first day and that first scene, I remember looking at the monitor, going, "I'm looking at Bobby now," which it's just like from take one, and I was like, it was a big weight off of my shoulders. And also Willem came down to the Kissimmee area before we needed him, and met with some of the motel managers that helped inspire the character, and I could, you must have been doing your work, what you had to do. Because it felt right on that first day that we were actually shooting with Willem. It just felt it was like, oh, good, okay, it's all blending.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do you? Well, this is probably a little more complicated, but is there something that you want an audience to take away when they watch this film? I mean, as we were talking about before,
Yes.
Obviously there are moments that are just gorgeous. And as you were mentioning, that they're literally shots, like the kids in front of the orange mural that are frameable. They're just gorgeous.
Right. Well, ultimately, I do want the audience to be thinking about the real little Moonees and little Scooties out there, and become an advocate for change in any way that they can. Whether that's perhaps looking into in their own communities. Because again, this is a national problem. This is not just Kissimmee and Orlando. We use Kissimmee and Orlando to make a point, but we live in LA. There's a very big issue out in San Bernardino. There's a big issue south in Anaheim, and so I'm hoping that this film helps bring awareness to it, and that's the first step to removing the stigma of homelessness. That's the first step to change. So ultimately the movie. I want the movie too, because it is a film, and it's going into multiplexes, et cetera. We want the audiences to be entertained for a certain amount of time, but then also be left with something, perhaps thinking about this issue and perhaps taking some action. And just I may as well just throw this out there right now. The Felix Foundation, which is Sheila Jaffe's foundation, which focuses on children in foster care. We're doing a campaign with them right now to help for the holidays. You can be a Secret Santa. You can find out all of this information on our Twitter and Facebook and A24's website, which is helping get gift cards for the children living in the Kissimmee, Orlando area. And then there's also the foundation the agency that we worked with directly that really helped us out. We even shot the social services scenes in their complex, in their facility, hope192.org, and they always need help in any way, even if it's spreading the word about their organization, because they're basically they are the housing authority for Kissimmee. The local government does not have a housing authority, so they outsource it to this nonprofit. So, just wanted to let you know about those two foundations.
And by the same token, I think it's that juxtaposition between the world they're living in this magic castle versus the magic castle that we see at the end. Do you think that there's a way that I almost feel like the ending is feels a little like a fable, and so the idea of being able to, be channel our inner Jancies and actually facilitate this kind of movement. We don't know what happens next, and that's not necessarily important. But it's the idea of doing something, which and as we were talking about before, where we as an audience position ourselves in relationship to the story. And there was one scene that I think is very interesting. It's the Brazilian couple, and in some ways, at least I felt like I wanted to be the Bobby in terms of my subjectivity, but in a lot of ways, we're the Brazilian couple, aren't we?
Yeah, that's how I saw it, actually, because they truly represent the outside, the tourists, all of us who've probably visited this area at one time, who have never looked behind the facade, don't look into the shadows, and are shocked when we do so. And that scene actually was supposed to come 60 minutes in, almost. It's on page 60 if you see it, if you read the screenplay. But there was something in post-production that was telling me it had to come a lot earlier to sort of give us our bearings in terms of exactly what was going on, where we were, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, that was I think I saw that as well, and that's why I needed to bring it earlier in the edit.
Is there a particular scene, and this is for both of you, is there a particular scene that you see as sort of the condensation of the emotions behind this film? Like, is there something that just stands out in a way that if this is it, this is where I'm, it has some sort of emotional resonance for the audience, so that I know I've made it clear to them here. Yeah.
The truth is, I don't think in those terms so much. I don't think about what I want people to like it. I want people to be engaged, but I just try to be engaged. I try to be present, and I try to be, I can't anticipate that. Otherwise, that robs me of a certain kind of intuition and a certain kind of inhabiting. But I will say, once I watch the movie, then I do relate to certain things and have certain kind of expectations, and I start to connect certain dots, but not while I'm doing it. And for me, when you're talking about a scene, for my character, there's something really beautiful about he does what he can, and he's heroic in his everyman way, not in a glorious way, in a practical way. He wants peace, but he can't save the situation at the end, and he's got to let it go. He's got to accept, and that's really hard, but I think that's the reality edge coming in. And he goes out in the back and he smokes a cigarette, and for me it's sort of it's moving when the woman's like complaining about the washing machine broken, and he says, I'm going to fix that tomorrow. Yeah. So maybe it's a little romantic or sentimental, but I think there are moments in this movie that show the beauty of human nature, where he kind of accepts that he can't, his limitations, but then he also hopes that another day he can do better. So it's kind of sentimental, but I think it's expressed in a way that's real and a way that I'm touched by.
I agree with that. It's hard. Also, it's hard as the co-writer to talk about that, because there are scenes that we were definitely trying to, we were trying to make points, but we never wanted to be too much on the nose. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna, he said it perfectly. I agree with that. Yeah.
Well, I just as an audience member, as a viewer, as I was telling you, that one scene when the two girls are together looking out, and Moonee takes her arm and wraps it around her.
Yeah.
It's like I'm tearing up thinking about that moment.
That's why that was all Brooklyn. Brooklyn, that's her, grabbing Valeria's hand and pulling it over her. I mean, we rolled for 10 minutes on that. We had a 10-minute mag on the camera, and I just rolled for 10 minutes of them just staring out, and we'd feed them lines, and we'd ask them to talk about things. But when it came down to it, it was just Brooklyn lifting her hand up onto her shoulder that meant everything, and I didn't really even notice that until the edit. And I said I had to choose that little section.
And that's kind of an example of, for me, from my point of view, why you can't think too much about what the effect is, or pointing at stuff, or trying to, maybe as a writer you can, but as a performer you can't, because you can't write that stuff. That came out of a situation. The actors, the characters are revealed through actions, and you can't anticipate what those actions mean.
I also have to say that with that scene, it also proves how on point Brooklyn is. I mean, it's like as if she's 7 going on 45. I mean, like, she truly is a prodigy, and sometimes she knows what's best for a scene. It's pretty incredible. And she was 6 when we shot. And she would know. She would sometimes even guide Bria in a way. Bria, who plays Haley in the movie. Like, she would guide the scenes sometimes. She had great intuition. Yeah. She wants to direct. She talked about directing someday. So yeah, maybe.
Bravo!
Yeah, I can't wait to see what she does.
And it's there are those moments that feel so organic. It feels really genuine, particularly the way the children interact with each other. And also the scenes between Hallie and Moonee, I think, are interesting because it feels like a child who had a child.
Well, that's definitely the point, and also that is how I had Bria do her first audition. When I came down, I said, I know you've already read the script and it's about mother-daughter, but I want you to go into this scene. And I put them in scenarios for our, for the audition tape. And I said, just go into this as thinking like a sibling relationship, like a sister relationship, making her on equal ground, treating your daughter as a 100% equal. Because, she was probably 15 when she had Moonee. She never had the chance to grow up herself. And she has, she's still very immature herself. And so I wanted that. And I think Bria nailed it in the audition. And that's what made us all realize she was going to be perfect for the role. Yeah.
Well, I could ask you questions all night, but I think I'm supposed to allow you folks to ask some questions now. If you have a question, just raise your hand. And the microphone over there.
Well, first of all, thank you, gentlemen, for just doing such a great job with this movie. Thematically, aesthetically, and emotionally, this film is very close to your latest project, Tangerine. But at the same time, on Tangerine, you were working with an iPhone and a gimbal. This one is 35 millimeter anamorphic. What was the logic behind transitioning to a totally different way of capturing the image? And how different was the process? Thank you.
Well, we didn't even have a gimbal, by the way. It was. Let's see. Well, first off, it's a big subject, and that whole subject of digital versus film. What's better? Or what's worse? I don't. So it's a big debate, and it's something which I am in a weird position to talk about because of the fact that Tangerine opened the doors for me and got this film made. And I am always telling, any aspiring filmmaker, any filmmaker who might not have the means to shoot on an expensive medium to just take the phone out of your pocket and shoot. That's how I got that film made. I was very inspired by the Dogma 95 movement that allowed me to make this film I co-directed called Takeout back in 2004. And I shot that thing on standard definition video, and it got me moving. It got me, and so whatever medium it requires to get you just to make your film, I am in 100% support of. I'm an advocate for all mediums. You can find beauty in all mediums. But this film, I always saw it as, I wanted that organic quality that comes only from the photochemical process that I feel can't be replicated in any other way, no matter what filters you throw on your digital image. And it was really about, again, it was about capturing the environment. And I felt that film would just showing the landscape. It was this movie, the location is such a character. And I wanted to capture it as if we were looking at postcards that our family was sending us from Orlando, And I mean postcards that we think about and almost, the ones that were shot on film and have a very photographic image and quality. So that's one thing. And then also, and this is a big deal for me, we live at a time when the threat of the death of celluloid is a real thing. And I had the means, the budget to shoot on film, and so I wanted to do my little part to help keep this medium alive. It's a medium that created this art, and I don't think we should just allow it to go away because cheaper or easier ones come about. So yeah. The last minute was shot on the iPhone, yes, for many reasons.
Other questions?
But even that was output to film and back again, by the way, for the geeks out there.
I've just been so impressed with how you work with non-actors, and I'm just wondering, do you have any advice for how to get people into this zone where they seem so real?
Oh, well, thank you. I don't even like using that term because they are actors. It's just that they're first timers, and I've just discovered them, and I've had a nice track record. So it allowed me to do that again with Bria. Bria, who plays Haley in the movie, we found off of Instagram. She was 100% green. She had less experience than Brooklyn. But I saw something in her persona, and I saw something in the way she held herself and carried herself and her physicality. And then it was all about whether or not she could actually act. I mean, that's a big thing. You have to, she came down, she had the audition, but then she showed that she had the enthusiasm to learn. And so she came a month early. I had an acting coach on the film, Samantha Kwan, who was there for the children, but took Bria under her wing, and we all worked together for a month to get her to the place where she needs to get to. And she can act, right? This doesn't always work. On Tangerine, Maya and Kiki were wonderful, but they had many friends that we thought were going to be in the film. Wonderful personas that we met and personalities that we met that we thought, oh, they would be so great in this movie. The minute you put a camera on them, they freeze up. I mean, it's obviously, acting is something, it's a skill. It's just not everybody can do it. So it's a combination of, it's taking the time to find the right people who will bring something to the character, and then they actually have to be able to do it. Yeah.
Okay.
So hey Sean, my name is DJ, and
Hi.
So you're going to places such as porn industry, you're going to Los Angeles streets, and now motel. And so how do you find the right story to tell? Do you write characters first, or do you find the setting first and research it? How do you find the right story?
Every film is different, In this case, my co-screenwriter saw potential in what was happening down in Kissimmee. He became aware of it through just being there. His mother had relocated to that area, and so he brought it to me. He was sending me news articles. So that was something that we were inspired by. Tangerine was all about the location. It was about the corner of Santa Monica and Highland. And that's it. I mean, that literally was it. We knew we wanted that there would be hundreds, thousands of stories to be told on that corner, and we had never seen it represented in film and television. And we said, well, why not? Let's go and immerse ourselves and try to find something there. And then the film before that, oh my God. Well, that's a whole other story. We were actually hanging out with adult film stars because I created a television show in which there were lots of cameos from adult film stars. And so we actually were with them on set. And I realized how regular their lives are and how their lives are very much like our lives. It was a young woman who was complaining because she forgot to put her laundry from the washing machine into the dryer. And I thought, that's the most unglamorous thing. That's something that I think about, And then, so we just decided to, I think these are stories that, I'm just, we are exploring, I think, maybe perhaps like microcosms or, subcultures, or in a way, and because I think it's in a response to what we're not seeing enough of in film and TV, especially in U.S. film and TV. But then once we get there, it's about telling universal stories. I think that's the most important part about it. Yeah.
This follows the Bree question. Where did you find Brooklyn?
Oh, well, Brooklyn came from a local casting company in Orlando called Crowdshot. And we wanted all the kids to be local. That was important. I didn't want to fly in kids from LA or New York. I wanted the kids, number one, to have the accent. Number two, to be comfortable at night going home to their real homes. We were stealing their summer from them. And I never wanted them to think of it as work. And so we went to this one company called Crowdshot, and they did all of our local casting, and they happened to have Brooklyn in their database. So she just came into the audition, and she actually was paired with Christopher that day. We were grouping kids together to see their chemistry. So we brought them in together, and Christopher did something that was just so funny. Like within seconds, he said, "Oh, I have to get myself ready for this audition." And he jumped down on the ground. He started doing push-ups, and Brooklyn was like, "Yeah, me too." And she just started doing squats. So I was like watching these two little kids do a boot camp before we even got them started, and I was just like, I'm already entertained.
Was there another question right there?
My question is about the scene where Bobby gets the guy from New Jersey who's bothering the kids. That scene really stuck out to me as being very different from a lot of the other interactions that the character Bobby had. Considering all of the danger, or what we would think of danger as the children being in on their day-to-day adventures, I was curious as to, and I guess to the director too, why that interaction was included in the film, and if, as another outlier like the Brazilian couple kind of coming in, they wanted to leave, but he was trying to come into the situation and was really forcibly pushed out in a way that I don't always think you were as direct with other people that you encountered day to day. It was much more nuanced and familial, but this was, I think, a really heroic moment for Bobby in the film.
Do you want me to? I'll just be brief about our research on that. When Chris and I went there, and we were speaking with whoever we could, and this is motel managers, small business owners, residents, the agencies, everybody brought up pedophilia. It was a big thing, it was rampant in the area. Pedophiles are drawn to the area because of children. And this was something that was brought up by so many people that we knew we were going to have to work it into the film somehow. And that's how we decided to work it in.
And the only thing for me that I remember that's kind of distinctive about that, and I understand what you say, it's slightly more dramatic than some of the other scenes. But one funny thing is, it shows you how practical stuff affects things. It's a written scene. It was written beautifully. But the truth is that the playground's over here, and this is where we encounter him, and we have to get to the soda machine. the logical place of the soda machine is way over there. So there was a certain, what kind of, for me, gave a little extra life to the scene was we had to vamp so I could get him from there to there. So you could, I mean, it had a good result, I think, in the respect that it allowed you to see Bobby working his way to check the guy out, you know, and also set him up. So I remember that kind of vamp with this guy to get him to the soda machine, that something like that. I suppose it could have been written, but it wasn't written so
Well, yeah,
much.
so we didn't know. We had written for a much shorter distance, I guess.
That's what
So that's why the hot tea stuff was Willem.
And you could have
Yeah.
moved the soda machine like to the middle of the parking lot, but I don't think it would have washed.
And I think you did the hot tea thing in one of the rehearsals, and I loved it. I was like, yeah, let's keep that. Let's keep that.
Other questions?
This is a question for both of you. Can you talk a little bit about Bobby's story, please, and how you thought about it, and the little bits that you did show us, and maybe what you wanted us to take away about him, other than his heroics? Yeah. Thank you.
Should I begin? Well, we met motel managers during our research process, and they seemed to have one common thread. They no matter what age they were, we noticed that these men had this internal struggle. They had a compassion and love for the families and the children who lived at the motels that they were managing, but at the same time, they kept the distance. Why? Because on any given day, they might have to evict one of them if they couldn't come up with their nightly rate. So emotionally, they didn't want to get close. Yet at the same time, they cared. So there was this reluctant parental figure that we saw in all these guys. And then, of course, as you know, we obviously see him with who's possibly a son, and we noticed that, you know, we didn't want to be too on the nose about it, but you know, he obviously is estranged from his wife, and because we're dealing again with, you know, families being separated, the themes of parental themes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we really went that direction with that character.
I think that kind of covers it. But also an interesting thing is also a lot of these people, they're challenged and they have to figure out kind of strategies to get through the day and make money, and they don't sometimes have resources or training to get, you know, the jobs and all that. So some of them, you know, develop a pretty good grift. So also Bobby doesn't want to be played all the time. Not only is he personally insulted by that because he does care about these people, but it also undermines his ability to kind of control things. And ultimately, you know, he's a guy that wants to watch the ball game. He wants peace. So if he's played by someone, it's going to make him less likely to cut someone else some slack. So that I think that's kind of the pleasure of watching the relationship between him and Bria. Because Bria, you know, you feel like he could, you know, she could walk all over him if he wasn't careful. You know, so there's this kind of little dance of authority and also compassion. I mean, yeah.
Other questions? Over here.
Please wait for the mic.
Can you talk about the helicopters? They seem so perfectly choreographed.
Yeah, well, it's part of what comes with shooting on location and not completely owning a location. You remember, this was a working motel, and there were working businesses all around us. Now, when we chose the Magic Castle, that helicopter port wasn't there. A few months out, this came about, and we panicked the first day, and everybody said, location sound is just going to be covered with the rotor sounds the entire time. But you know, but then you gotta always find you incorporate real life. You know, that's what I try to do, and I realize that's been something I've been doing all along with these other movies anyway. It's like, so why not embrace it? It's part of the environment. It's a real thing, and then you start looking for the benefits. And you're like, oh, but this actually can help us. This can build tension. This can become. I never planned to score this film. I mean, even in the script, I think we say there's no score. So I needed a sound. I needed a wall of sound anyway. I needed a soundscape, and that provided that. Yeah, exactly. So then we actually started timing our shots for the helicopter, and yeah. So there's all that, and then people have come up to me after Q&As thinking that we were teasing like a Deus Ex Machina thing, where she would jump on the helicopter at the end and fly off. And I'm like, that's cool. If you guys want to think that, that's great. So, yeah.
Another question? Oh, sorry.
Please wait for the mic, sir.
Wait for that.
When you film with animals, you have the animal cruelty people looking over your shoulder.
Right.
So at the end of the movie, you can say no animals were harmed in the making of this movie. So here with kids and the barrage of the script and the fuck yous per cubic second, how can you sort of position yourself that no children were harmed in the making of this movie?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. That was obviously extremely important for us, for the kids to never be exposed to anything they don't have to be exposed to at their young age. So all the adult themes in the film are obviously kept from the young actors. My actors are smart enough, though, to know that someday they'll understand the movie they were in. They would even say that on set. But the profanity was basically the only thing. And the profanity had to be addressed on day one, meaning not the first day of production, but the day that we actually cast the children. We had the parents come to the back room of the casting company, and we said, we love your children, we love for them to be in this film, but you have to understand that they're going to not only be hearing profanity, but uttering profanity, and how should we deal with this, and what is the most appropriate way. And this was something that their parents and Samantha Kwan, our acting coach, and myself and production in general, we discussed this. And basically in the end, it was saying that to the kids, these are words only to be used between my action and my cut. These are words not to be used in the real world. And they got it. And they were very respectful of that and understood. And so it was something in which just we had to get parental approval. And ultimately, again, these children are very intelligent, and they understood that these were words from the dialogue and to be only used in character.
Thank you both for this beautiful, breathtaking, warm work.
Thank you very much.
I first saw it about a month ago, and I have been wanting to make everybody on this planet, and especially in this country and government, to see it, and which I had the power to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think that's a good place to stay. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And once again, thank you to these wonderful gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us.
And tell people to go and see this movie.